He's 40 feet away near the timeline. Now Jimmer sizing up Moss. Oh, no. Oh, yes! Oh, yes! A three-footer for Jimmer.
How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the Jimmer Range podcast. I'm Karl Heiser, joined as always by Alex Cervantes. We are back for another season of college basketball. We did not do very well with getting episodes out last season, but we are once again committed to the cause. We are bringing back the show. Alex, how you doing?
I'm doing swell. The viewers at home, the Wi-Fi in my apartment has been all over the place. So this has been a dilemma. So we shall see how this goes. But, you know, I love talking about the conference that defined my childhood. So this should be good.
For sure. Yeah. Teacher wheels in the TV.
Oh yeah. We were getting no work done in March.
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
Exactly. So yeah, today we will be previewing the ACC. We're planning on going through all of the formerly Power 6, now Power 5 conferences. RIP, sort of, to the Pac-12.
It's coming back. It's rising from the ashes of its own destruction.
It is, but not really. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
Last few years at the ACC, people have complained about the relative strength of the conference until it sends 6 teams to the Elite Eight, and the ACC ultimately gets the last laugh. Add 3 new teams this year. We got SMU, Cal, and Stanford in the mix. We are no longer limited to just the Atlantic Coast. It is the All-Coast Conference these days.
Oh, goodness. The former Colonial, now Coastal Athletic Association really beat the ACC to the punch on.
Yeah.
The rebrand was right there if they needed
for sure.
it.
For sure.
But yeah, no, this is just a hilarious conference in itself at this point. Listen, I've been there. You know, I'll stick my hand up as a staunch ACC defender. But today I was just thinking about just generally these kind of the dueling fates in the regular season for this conference, and then the postseason. Some team works some magic, and the one postseason in all of sports that is least conducive to actually revealing who maybe the best team in the sport is. Spare UConn, obviously, last year, that speaks for itself. But so often when you're in a single elimination tournament, it's not obviously any of these games are. This argument has been beaten to death by so many people smarter than me. So it's the bids have dried up, and that is making ACC people upset, even as you get Clemson, Elite Eight, Duke, Elite Eight, NC State, Final Four, and people are going, well, look at all the success. So it's an interesting.
Right.
Kind of
when it wasn't even for the most part, the conference's best representatives to begin with, Carolina had a 1 seed last year, and they fell to Alabama. So, all right. So we're going to go through each team. We're going to give our thoughts, try to do a couple minutes on each of them. We have drastically changed the way we've done this from the first years of the podcast, where back when we did those previews, we'd previewed the teams in reverse projected order of finish, and it was a disaster. It was very convoluted, and we ended up talking way too much about teams that just weren't good. So this year and in the last couple years, we've done where we preview the teams in order of how they finished last season. So that way there will be some turnover, obviously. Louisville will be a team that doesn't necessarily deserve to be talked about last, but they did finish last place in the conference last year. But for the most part, teams will get talked about in accordance with their relative strength, which I think is much better and much more entertaining for everybody. It's not really worth it waiting 55 minutes to hear about the best teams in a conference. So to kick things off, we're starting out with North Carolina. Tar Heels got a 1 seed in last year's NCAA tournament before losing to Alabama in the Sweet 16. Returned basically the entire backcourt from that team, which is what I think the big selling point is for this Tar Heels team. You have RJ Davis, preseason All-American, one of the favorites, if not the absolute favorite for ACC Player of the Year. Definitely one Duke player who will have something to say about that, as well as potentially a Wake Forest player as well. but we'll get to those guys. You also bring back Elliot Cadeau, good playmaker, has never really been a shooter, so we'll see if that's something that he's added to his game. Seth Trimble's back, Yadian Jackson, who's a 5-star. Alex, give me just some quick thoughts on North Carolina, what you expect from these guys this season.
Fully expect them to be contending once again for a regular season title in the ACC and obviously beyond. It's North Carolina. It's a blue blood, much like Duke. You have Final Four expectations every year. When you return a first-team All-American, there's no reason to expect anything less. I mean, I think the big question mark around this roster is just obviously the front court. Like you lose Armando Bacot, who is obviously so central to success over the last couple of seasons, but beyond that, even last year, just his drop coverage defensively, how much that. I mean, I can't remember forgive me for not remembering the actual rim pressure statistics, but I believe it was like top 25 nationally in terms of just making opponents' life hell at the rim. Plus you lose Ingram and Cormac Ryan on the wings. So it's a lot to replace. I mean, just having gone to school with Cade Tyson, big personal fan of his. I know he can shoot the cover off the basketball, so that'll provide some spacing even when – let's see if – I mean, the big question besides the front court, if Jalen Washington or Van Allen Lubin can kind of step into that Bacot-size hole down there is if Cadeau can't be punked anymore on the offensive end, can't have Grant Nelson just sitting in the paint like he did in the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Cadeau hit one out of his 1-3. He was a perfect 100% in their team scrimmage from a couple days ago at the time of this recording. So
on pace to be the best shooter in the country.
Yeah, on pace to be the best shooter in the country. Hasn't missed in a game. So yeah, I mean, I don't know when that's probably the best backcourt duo in the country. And then I'm really high on Drake Powell too. I just think his defensive upside and what he kind of brings to that squad will probably unlock something. It just what do you think of Lubin and Washington is kind of the big thing for me.
Yeah, Bacot, I mean, just so tough to replace. And a guy who was really solid last year was kind of taken for granted a little bit, I think, just because a lot of the focus was on the backcourt. But, you bring back Jalen Washington, who you mentioned, who has always kind of shown these flashes of being a guy. It's just like, can he fully step into that this season? And then you have Van Allen Lubin from Vanderbilt. He averaged 12 and 6 for a bad Vanderbilt team. So I mean, he'll get minutes. It's just a question of are those going to be quality minutes for them? Yeah, the spacing definitely got, I think, significantly worse with the losses of Ingram and Ryan. Both those guys shot over 35% from three last year. And Ingram's a guy who, he struggled his last year at Stanford, but then kind of got his shot back and was such an important piece, not only with the shooting, but also with the rebounding as well. I think he averaged in the ballpark of 7 or 8 rebounds a game, which was, really important for this team. He just did so many things for them. But yeah, I like Cade Tyson a lot. I like the Cade Tyson shout. He shot 45% from three for Belmont last year. And he kind of slides into that, into the Brady Manick role from a couple seasons ago. That's kind of my thoughts on what he's bringing to the table.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, obviously they're different body types and different players, but I could see it if they kind of go for a more small ball 4 role. I do have some defensive question marks for him guarding bigger wings in the conference. But again, he's just going to be, you can't leave him offensively. And when he's the, tertiary option on that offense, that's even better because he's not going to have to force a ton.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, this team's top 7 is really good. It just kind of comes down to if Jalen Washington can be a solid to good, both defensive presence and maybe providing something more, some flashing or he's flashed some passing chops. So I'm excited to see if those kind of develop throughout the course of the year.
Yeah, what do you expect from Ian Jackson?
I don't really know. He strikes me as such a volume scorer that he needs to have the ball in his hands, but he's so good in transition, and with Hubert Davis clearly wanting this team to play so fast, you have to imagine he's just kind of going to have the opportunities to get downhill and get to the rim whenever he wants. The question mark's always kind of been, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in high school it was always the consistency of his 3-point shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think if that's there, this unlocks a whole new world for Hubert Davis. But I don't know. I think if I was rolling out Carolina's starting lineup for November 4th, I think I'd go Cadeau, Davis, Drake Powell, Tyson, and then probably Washington. I think that's probably your best like mix of, because I think RJ Davis gives you the scoring that Jackson can provide. And so I think if you can do him as kind of that microwave scorer off the bench, but maybe that's probably pigeonholing him too much given his talent.
Yeah. It is tough because there is kind of a log jam in the backcourt just with all the guys that they brought back. Would have been really nice if they had, a 5-star freshman coming in to play in the front court. And that is like, I think the big questions are how much of a step back does like the 3-point shooting take this year with the losses of Ingram and Cormac Ryan? And then, like, what are you getting from the front court? And it might not even be readily apparent, like, how rough the front court is, because just looking throughout this conference, I don't think there are going to be a lot of front courts that like really punish North Carolina for any weaknesses down low. So it might not even be something that we're totally aware of in ACC play. It might be something that we see in non-conference play or later on in the tournament, but definitely something to watch for. On the strength of the backcourt alone, should be one of the best teams in the ACC. Should be like a lock for the top 3 at least, and could definitely win the conference once again this season. But that front court could be brutal. We'll have to see. All right, moving on to Duke. I had forgotten the banner for North Carolina, but we'll throw it up for Duke. So Duke last year, 4th seed in the tournament before losing to NC State in the Elite Eight, which I'm sure left a pretty nasty taste in a lot of Blue Devil fans' mouths. As with any Duke team, you always are going to have guys who leave for the pros. So Jared McCain, Kyle Filipowski, both moved on to the NBA. Even besides those guys, there's a decent amount of turnover. So Jeremy Roach transferred to Baylor. A big loss that I think like a lot of people don't realize like how big of a loss that was. Ryan Young, Northwestern legend, no longer there. And Mark Mitchell transferred out as well. And this is Cooper Flagg's team. It's crazy that we're 13 minutes into the ACC preview podcast, and this is the first that we're mentioning his name. But it's going to be the Cooper Flagg show. He's 5-star, number 1 recruit in the class. He's going to be an elite defensive playmaker. And kind of what I think Duke will be looking for is how much the other aspects of his game round out. Like, is he going to be able to stretch the floor? He's such an elite athlete and such a good playmaker on not just the defensive end, but also offensively as well, that he will definitely have a major impact for this team. And is one of these freshmen that coming in, you're like, he could maybe win National Player of the Year. Like, as crazy as that sounds. But it's been a while since we've had one of those freshmen. I mean, going back to like the Zion days, it's been a while since we've had a freshman where they're this highly touted. So I'm done talking about Duke. I'm gonna let Alex talk about Duke because that's his wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, besides the fact that he's 17 years old, and not to do the whole like Alabama Ryan Williams thing, because I think that's going to be beaten to death before Flagg turns 18 in late December. But I do work, like I don't really know, because I mean I was only, what was I, 9 or 10 when the Anthony Davis season was, but I don't know how much. I don't think Flagg's counting stats will be maybe to the same level as someone like RJ Davis or Mark Sears or Janai Broome, especially in the scoring department. So I wonder if that would impact the National Player of the Year candidacy. But from all the film anyone's ever seen, like that argument's to be made. And then I think just in terms of the way Shire constructed this roster, it's really interesting because everyone on this roster is taller than 6'5". He clearly wants to just have kind of not only switchability and versatility, which have been pillars of his defensive systems early in his career, but also just I think he just wanted that positional size. And maybe that was because he saw last year playing an undersized backcourt and he was privy to what the lack of a rim protector does. Because I know you were ahead of that last year. You were talking about how big of a concern that was. And I think I approached it more from an optimist perspective. And I was like, it could be a protection by committee approach. And that's kind of the case this year. But you have Kaman Malwatch, you have Cooper Flagg, you have Malik Brown, all kind of patrolling now. And wasn't the case last year. So I think there is something to be said that Shire picked up on kind of the failings last year and has done his best to try to correct that. It's just whether the product on the court meets it. I honestly think a lot of the season hinges on whether Tyrese Proctor can get to the rim and finish. Because if he can't get downhill, I really worry. And I don't think Proctor's place in this lineup is going to be stripped from him. Like, I don't think you're sending one of your captains to the bench. So I'm curious. There's so much talent on this team, and it feels like every offseason, especially under Shire, he's been like, we're gonna run, we're gonna play faster, and then he has in his 2 years has produced like sub 250 tempo teams in Ken Palm. It's like, really, like, you can't you have all this talent across the floor. But no, I'm interested. I think it's hard to poke a ton of holes besides the obvious youth within the roster, because I think you have the shooting with Con Knipple or Darren Harris or Mason.
There it is. I was wondering when you were going to bring up Con. I know you're a big Con guy.
No, I'm a big Con guy. I got to see that guy in person in Wisconsin a couple times, and man, he was. I mean, I wasn't expecting this lottery type buzz, but he just the lack of exposure when you're playing for a high school in Wisconsin versus, I'm sure he had opportunities to transfer to one of the bigger prep powerhouses. But yeah, no, it's interesting. He just is, the adjectives of like fundamental and savvy and crafty, all to describe him as a scorer, are going to be way overused, but it just, that does kind of embody what his game is. Like, he's got this big frame. He just kind of gets to his spots. He uses a bunch of pump fakes to get around. He's a lights out shooter. This roster is really good. Like, I just think it is. It's just whether Shire can kind of keep it at an insane level, whether I know there were some reported locker room issues last year. You never know if that rears its head again, but yeah, I'm fascinated by how this kind of unfolds, because I do think that there is a lot of pressure on Shire to make a Final Four, especially at Duke, no less, but just in kind of general that, they landed the Boozers a couple of days ago and that graphic started to float of it was now 12 5-stars he's landed. And I think there's a question to be asked if there's a different coach on the sidelines for Duke, like what does that, not that I think Duke fans would want a different coach, but I think it's, people can kind of make the argument that if you replaced him with, what if you gave Steve Forbes that talent, or what if you gave insert another ACC coach? So anyway, this Duke roster is really good. And
for all the freshmen, I wanted to pull up the stat because I had this bookmarked for a while, but this is courtesy of Andrew Weatherman. So the Blue Devils 2024-25 roster sets program records for cumulative collegiate minutes played, games started, total rebounds, and three-point field goals made across the three-point era. So we talk about all the cool toys that Shire has with all these, highly touted freshmen, but then you talk about the Big Ten Sixth Man of the Year in Mason Gillis from Purdue, who's just been a great glue guy like throughout his collegiate career. You have Sion James from Tulane, who I've been a big Tulane guy the last couple of years. Like the Green Wave have never kind of reached the expectations that I had for them. They haven't made the tournament, but they had some dudes down there. They had some dudes down there in Tulane. Plus, you had just an elite defensive player in Malik Brown from Syracuse, and just taking everything in sum. Like, yeah, it's year 3 for Tyrese Proctor. A lot of people were projecting that last year would be the big Tyrese Proctor breakout, but maybe that's actually this year. Like, maybe everybody was a year early on that. You have Caleb Foster back for another year, so it's his sophomore campaign. When you take like the experience and just the elite talent level, the Duke Blue Devils have legit national title upside. Like, I don't think that that's a hot take or anything. The big question I have is just, is there enough? There's so much like talent and so much versatility, but my big question is there enough playmaking on the offensive end? Because Proctor never quite like reached those heights last year. Roach was like good for it somewhat, but he's not really like a true one. Obviously, like, the standard's really high. Like you said, it's Duke. Shire's been there for 2 years now, and it's funny because you brought up the Boozer twins committing to Duke, and of course the knock whenever Shire gets one of these, top 20 recruits is like, well, he hasn't won a title yet. It's like, what do you mean he hasn't won a title yet? He's been there for 2 years, but that's like, that just speaks more, I think, to the level of talent, if anything. Like, it's crazy what they have down there. So,
I mean,
what would you consider a success for this team, I guess, is my question.
Duke historically in my lifetime has never put much stock in the regular season title, ironically. It feels like it's always been getting hot in the ACC tournament. But I think I with this roster, I think, and how deep they can go, I think it's probably an ACC regular season title. Probably like 25-6 in the regular season, or better. Not going out in the quarters of the ACC tournament again. And then, I don't know, I think Elite Eight again would be a success. I don't think people would view it as that, but I would push back if someone said that it wasn't a successful year if you win one of the 2 ACC titles and make an Elite Eight, because at that point, even when you get to the Sweet 16, it's such a crapshoot that it's like the ball can bounce, especially those new evolution balls. Like those balls can bounce anywhere. So, it's fascinating. Shire's finished. I think he was projected. Oh gosh, I should have written these numbers down. He was projected to finish like 18th in his first year, maybe, and I think he finished 16th or vice versa. And then it was projected 7th and finished 9th in year 2. Like, he's finishing about where one would expect them to. It's just it's you have all this young talent that you're bringing in, and people are expecting 2012 Kentucky or 2015 Duke, and you can't. I don't know. I would push back that you can't replicate that every year. But then it becomes an argument about, isn't that how you should construct your roster? So
sure. Yeah. And I think the roster construction this year actually will be a big help in that regard. Just with there's depth, there's so much experience on this team. So Shire has the flexibility to kind of mix and match and like figure out what the best combination of guys is.
And I think Tyrese Proctor will be better this year because he really came along that kind of third part of his freshman year when he kind of developed that connection with Lively as a lob threat. And I think he has that again, both in Flagg, but also more specifically in Malwatch. And I just think I think there's enough playmaking by committee that it could work. I wonder who the last shot goes to if they need it. I actually think it would go Caleb Foster, but
sure.
Yeah. No, I think Caleb Foster is going to lead this team in scoring. So,
okay.
Yeah, that's probably my bold take for this big team. I don't even know if it's that bold, honestly. But.
Yeah, that's like Coach K drawing up a last shot for Cam Reddish type vibes.
Hey, he hit that one against Florida State.
He cashed it.
He hit that one against Florida State. They all went towards RJ.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, so that's Duke. Extremely talented team. Should absolutely be considered one of the favorites, not only in the ACC, but definitely one of the top 10 teams in the country on paper. Moving on, let's go to everyone's least favorite tournament team last year, the Virginia Cavaliers, infamously included in the field, kept Indiana State out, and then predictably, I would say, got boat raced by Colorado State in the first four. It was another Tony Bennett type season. They were the number 7 defense and the number 200 offense. They lose Ryan Dunn and Reese Beekman, 2 of their top 3 scorers, and also their 2 best individual defenders. So on paper, that's a pretty big blow. They had Jalen Worley from Florida State, who adds experience and length on the wing, plus a few more unproven pieces who I'm really interested to see what they bring to the table this year. So you have TJ Power coming in from Duke. Was he a 5-star or a 4-star?
I think he was 5-star some services.
Was he a 5-star?
4-star others. He was like a fringe. He was on that yeah.
Okay, yeah. So they bring in TJ Power from Duke, Day-Day Ames from Kansas State, who played 20 minutes a game last year. It feels like on paper this is just going to be like an Isaac McNeely chuck fest. He shot almost 45% from 3 last year. It just doesn't seem to be a great recipe for success. They come into media day the other day and they say they want to play faster, which I almost think would be a bad thing for this team. I don't think this Virginia team should be the one that wants to play faster, because I just don't think they have the horses for that. They'll play good team defense as they always do. I think there's really been one kind of iffy year that Tony Bennett's had in the last, 5 or 6 years where they weren't actually as great defensively, but pretty consistent in that regard. You can expect Virginia, they're going to run the pack line out there. They're going to score like 50 points a game and hold their opponent to 40. And it's not going to be super fun to watch. Overall, I'll say, I'll have you give your thoughts after this. I'm pretty out on Virginia this year. People say like believe in Tony Bennett. Believe in Tony Bennett to do what? I just don't think this roster, it's demonstrably worse than it was, I think, last season. And I just don't think the recipe for success is there. I think it's going to be Isaac McNeely taking a ton of shots, or whatever a ton of shots looks like in a slow-paced offense like Virginia. But he's going to have a pretty high shot volume, I think. And they're just going to try to grind out wins. But I don't really know what to expect from a guy like Day-Day Ames, who averaged like 5 points a game last year in sort of a complimentary role for Kansas State. I just don't know what it would take to get this team to the tournament. I'm pretty out on Virginia, I think, and we'll talk about. We have our own tier list coming up towards the end of the show, but yeah, we'll get to that a little bit later on. Alex, are you a little higher on Virginia than me, or do you also see the concerns?
You talk about like the what does Tony Bennett do aspect of it, and it's just that he always finishes in the top 5 of the ACC's regular season standings. And so that to me is like, in the same sense that we now, even when people might question the overall talent of this UConn roster after the last 2 seasons, there's almost you just give the credit to Dan Hurley to figure it out. Or in Purdue, you just have to give the nod to Matt Painter getting it done in the Big Ten at this point.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing with Tony Bennett, that he's just going to figure out a way to grind out like 11 to 14 wins in a 20-game ACC slate. And I don't think they're getting to 14 this year. Let me make that clear. But I do wonder if, once again, a top 5 ACC finish has them kind of in the tourney conversation, when, again, it is not the most aesthetically pleasing composition of players ever. So I really don't know. I'm curious. The whole issue with like TJ Power at Duke last year was that he couldn't defend. So it's this fascinating kind of insertion of him into one of the country's best defensive systems, and like, yeah, let's see if this works type thing. The Day-Day Ames experiment is going to be interesting to me. Like, I don't really know what to make of that. Yeah, someone's got to take the shots. Like, also, who's putting pressure on the rim too? That would be my question. And I don't even know, it's just the offense is going to be. I think you would rather want a root canal than watching Virginia play offense this season. So,
Yeah, I actually did go to the dentist earlier today. And so,
really?
if you're talking about the spectrum of things that I enjoy, it's college basketball on the positive end. And I think maybe just as far in the negative direction as going to the dentist. Watching this Virginia team might be closer to going to the dentist for me.
Yeah. I mean, because what I struggle with is that McNeely and Power are such good shooters. And this team, I think they shot 37% maybe on the season last year, 36%, somewhere in there. And the offense was atrocious even with that shooting, It just and so you get Power in, and so you now space the floor a little bit more. So maybe that opens up for Jalen Worley. Maybe it opens up for Elijah Saunders. Does Andrew Rohde actually do something this year? That dude, that was tough to watch last season. His arrival in the ACC. So, yeah, I don't know. The defense is going to be there. They're going to battle and grind out games once again, and I wouldn't bet against Tony Bennett finishing top 5 in the ACC, but
I might be. I'm going to be honest.
I'm not.
It's a tough sell. It is a tough sell.
Yeah, I'm not in love with it. I'm not in love with it, especially when you lose two of the country's best premier defenders in Reese Beekman and Ryan Dunn.
Right. You expect the team defense will still be there, but I think that's a lot tougher to implement when you lose great individual defensive players. And you're switching out Ryan Dunn, who can apparently shoot threes now. I don't know if you saw that. He had 6 threes in the first NBA preseason.
The step back three over Jokic, I was like, I have never seen you act like this before.
Yeah, Ryan Dunn, I was unfamiliar with your game. Oh, man. Yeah, but losing Dunn and Beekman, I think, is tough when you're switching them out for TJ Power. And Jalen Worley's not bad. I don't want to knock on Jalen Worley at all. I think he's probably the best transfer addition, at least on paper. But I don't think it's going to be a very enjoyable Virginia team. That doesn't, to your point, enjoyable and getting results are not necessarily the same. They probably will still grind out wins just because of the system, but I'm not going to be happy about it. I'll just say that. I don't have to enjoy it if I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. Maybe you bring up they might kind of sneak their way into the tournament conversation again. I mean, maybe. We'll have to wait, though. I don't love what I see on paper is the only thing. I do like Isaac McNeely a lot. I hope he just gets buckets and Virginia finishes 8th. I don't know. All right, next up. Feels a little early to be talking about these guys, but it's all because of what Jeff Capel's done the last couple of years. So Pitt has finished, I think, top 4 in the ACC each of the last 2 seasons, neither of which anybody really saw coming. I think we talked last year, and we left it open to the possibility that Pitt might have another surprise kind of in their back pocket, and they did. And they had Bub Carrington, who was really good. He's gone, lottery pick, headed to DC to play for the Wizards. And then Blake Hinson's gone as well. The Pitt Panthers were a bubble team last year, and one of the big reasons they missed out on a tournament berth was their non-conference was pretty brutal. They lost to Mizzou, who went 0-18 in SEC play, plus some other questionable games on the resume. Does Pitt do enough in the non-conference? Do they have an impressive enough season in ACC play to where they can kind of get themselves off that bubble conversation? This team is honestly a toss-up for me. They could surprise, I think, and be a top 6-ish team, or they could just kind of turn back into a pumpkin. A lot of that to me depends on whether Lowe is actually going to break out, because a lot of people are projecting that. in the absence of Bub Carrington that Lowe is going to have like a really good season this year. I could totally see it. I don't expect much from these guys, but I've been wrong before. Do you see the vision with Pitt, or is this one of the teams that you're maybe lower on in the grand scheme of things?
Oh gosh. I mean, we'll get into it later because I think there's a clear like top 3 in this conference, and then it's just a mess kind of after that a little bit. And so I don't know. I would say I think Pitt's probably a tournament team just because I am kind of buying that kind of backcourt trio of Lowe, Leggett, and Damian Dunn, harkening back to his days at Temple as their kind of offensive weapon. And so I think if those hit, and obviously again, like the preseason's just spent projecting, going, oh, I like this guy. Oh, I don't like this guy. This guy's going to hit type thing. So I don't know. I could totally be wrong on this, but Jeff Capel's not coaching for his job anymore. So I guess that's a win in itself. He's pretty secure. Oh gosh, like are they going to be able to score in the paint?
They have the Diaz-Grahams back in the front court, for better or worse. I
was going to ask, do you really like that? You know,
I don't know. I mean, they were around like even 2 years ago when Pitt was a tournament team. Both these guys have been around, so from like a continuity standpoint, I'd say that's a good thing. And overall, like Pitt has pretty decent continuity. Like they return those backcourt pieces you mentioned. It's just where is like the upper end talent on the team? I'm not totally sure. So that's kind of my big question.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think Cam Corrin's a good add too, just in the front court. And so I wanted to make mention of him, but yeah, I don't know. I just do think it kind of hinges on Lowe and then probably Dunn too, especially if Dunn can defend at a moderately good level.
Yeah.
Which one would expect after playing it under Kelvin Sampson?
For sure. Yeah, that's a good shout. All right, moving on to last year's number 5 team, a team that I know you're very high on this season, the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Alex, give me the sell for Wake Forest because I know you're very in on Wake Forest.
Oh yeah, no, this team's winning the conference.
You're not joking about that either.
No, I'm not. Like I'm fully bought in on this team.
Yeah,
winning the conference. I think not only do I think this team is finally going to remedy last season's horrendous home versus away displays. I just think this top 8, where they're not integrating Efton Reed into the lineup, and hopefully he isn't fouling everyone every 5 seconds. That would be nice. But I think that when you have a top 8 of Hunter Salas, who is going to be right there with RJ Davis, and then I guess theoretically Cooper Flagg too for ACC Player of the Year. Cam Hildreth is such a – I mean, I guess if everyone calls Cam Hildreth underrated, that just make him properly rated at this point?
Maybe,
but
yeah.
He just is, right? Like he is their kind of do-it-all kind of third guard. Tyler Johnson's – I think he's going to hit. It's just another transfer guard under Steve Forbes. I think that's going to work.
Yeah.
Add in Efton Reed, figured it out. You're bringing in Trayvon Spillers from App State, who was awesome last year in the Sun Belt. Parker Friedrichsen's going to be great. Juke Harris. People have been saying great things. I know Rothstein had a tweet out too. He did his whole remember the name bit. So maybe I'm drinking too much of the Wake Forest Kool-Aid, but I'm buying that. And especially I think the upside swing of like Omaha Blue is really good too. So I think I'm just buying that Steve Forbes is going to figure this out and remedy kind of the issues that plagued this team at the end of last year, which is basically that they couldn't win away from home. And so, again, I know we talked about this on the Two Pointers podcast with Trevor Everett, which I don't know when that's coming out, but I do think Wake Forest kind of title campaign hinges on there's this late January stretch where they play Duke and Carolina back-to-back, and I think that probably decides the ACC regular season champ. And I would bet they're both played at the Joel, and I would bet that Wake probably ends up doing that because this offense is going to rock, and I think the defense should get better. So I don't know. I'm pretty in.
You've definitely sold me. Like, I think Wake Forest is a lock to make the tournament. That's where I'm at on this team, and I think definitely, in my mind, a top 3 team in the ACC for sure. I don't know about win the conference. I haven't quite had the Kool-Aid to the same degree that you have, but I do see the vision with this Wake Forest team, which Steve Forbes, like over the last couple of years, not enough people talk about how much of a transfer portal wizard this guy is. Just constantly brings in great system fits and guys that hit for the last like couple of years. He's adapted so well to that change in the landscape. And even losing guys like Boopy Miller to SMU and Andrew Carr to Kentucky, 2 really good offensive pieces. The 1-2 punch of Hunter Salas and Cam Hildreth is going to be great. I think Tyler Johnson will hit because, like you said, it's just Steve Forbes bringing in a guard. Like, he's going to get the most out of that guy. And, the front court will definitely be interesting, but I'm glad you shouted out Omaha Billieu, former 5-star, who didn't quite hit to the degree that I think a lot of people expected at Iowa State. But if he's something this year, I mean, Wake Forest is in a really good spot at that point. Like, if just everybody's hitting. And Trevon Spiller's 12-8 at App State last year. Just a solid addition. I'm very sold on Wake Forest. Hunter Salas is a dog. I'm a big Hunter Salas fan. He was always kind of the victim of just a crowded backcourt rotation at Gonzaga. So it's really cool to see him like just be awesome. He had 18 points a game last year, and he'll probably bump that up to 20. So Wake Forest. This is a Wake Forest podcast. Next up, the Clemson Tigers. Dream tournament run for Clemson last year. They were a 6th seed in the tournament that made it all the way to the Elite 8 after everybody expected them to lose their first game against New Mexico. I definitely picked them to lose to New Mexico. Brownell might be off the hot seat for the first time in forever, which is crazy to say. This is year, I think, 15 for him at Clemson, and maybe half of that. Yeah, maybe half of that has been him on the hot seat. PJ Hall, Joe Girard are the big losses, especially from an offensive perspective, spacing the floor. But Clemson gets some dudes back. They got Chase Hunter back to lead the backcourt, bring in Jaden Zachary from Boston College. He's a guy who shot 40% from 3 last year. Ian Shiflin's back in the front court, almost 47% from 3 on over 5 attempts a game last year. He was kind of what everybody expected PJ Hall to be last season. Like, that was Ian Shiflin. And you had Victor Lakin from Cincy, who can hold it down at the 5. Christian Reeves coming over from Duke. Got to give him a shout. Should be a really solid team. Like, I think the guys that they're bringing back, I think they made, solid additions with Jaden Zachary and Victor Lakin. Should be a tournament team, if I had to guess. If I was projecting forward, I would say that this is a tournament team. Really interested to see what Chase Hunter does this year.
Did you mention Chauncey Wiggins?
No, I didn't. I totally did not.
Another guy. Very abnormal, just for his size. Like, I remember watching a Clemson game, maybe it was the beginning of the season, just wondering how this guy was, like, slotted, I guess, theoretically at the 2 or I can't remember what it was. But, no, it's a good core. I would agree. I don't know. Just PJ Hall's just impact on both ends of the floor. Like, it's just – man, it's just going to be so hard to replace. And so I think maybe I'm underselling Girard a little bit in that I think, like you said, Zachary is going to be able to kind of maybe fill that role, even if it's to a lesser degree. But, yeah, I mean, +2, I think Jack Clark is a big loss, defensively especially. So I would agree that it's probably a tournament team, and Brownell did a really good job adding or filling the holes kind of in the portal. But they should have shooting, so I think that'll help them. I know I'm just saying very generic things, but it does just kind of hinge on, I think whether Chase Hunter is probably an all ACC guard. And then if Ian Shefflin can really step up now what's he going to be, like number 2 on opposing team scouting reports? So he is their kind of do-it-all guy, like you said. They're old, they're experienced. So that's good. That's always good nowadays.
For sure. Yeah, experience in shooting will get you a pretty long way. I like Clemson. I don't know what the like upper end outcome is for Clemson. Like maybe a 4th place finish in the ACC is like the ceiling for me. But I don't see I think they have a pretty high floor. That's where I'm at with Clemson. All right, next up. Let me find the banner for them. Syracuse. Alex, what do you think about Syracuse this year? I have interesting thoughts about Syracuse.
Oh man, maybe you should just go. I really don't. I remember I was trying to think about this roster and I couldn't. I don't know how big of a fan of JJ Starling I am, which I feel like really influences my perception of this roster.
Sure.
And so I think Donnie Freeman's really good. I think he's going to kind of rock in the front court next to Lampkin. I don't know. This feels like one where it's, please correct me if I'm wrong, maybe one of those teams in the ACC with a higher ceiling, but definitely a way lower floor. There's a smattering of kind of outcomes for Red Autry's second season. So
for sure.
Because that I think is what I've really kind of struggled with, and I guess if the defense is also up to snuff when you lose Malik Brown to Duke. So yeah, I'll let you expound a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree with you in terms of I think there is a wide range of outcomes for this Syracuse team. But after looking through it, I think I've settled more on the positive end for Syracuse, which I didn't really expect going in. I think I ended up being a little bit higher on this team than I think most people are. The big loss is obviously Judah Mintz, who opted to go pro. A bunch of other guys transferred, but I still think they're going to be okay. I think the Jaquan Carlos ad from Hofstra is so fun. Just a pure point guard. He averaged over 6 assists a game last year. Set the CAA single game record with 19 assists in a single game last year. So as far as guys you want running the show, and he can score a little bit when he needs to. I think he averaged 10 points a game last year, but it's not nothing. As far as guys you want at the one, I think he's a fantastic option, a fantastic addition. You're right. JJ Starling is, who knows, really with JJ Starling, game to game, but he did score 13 points a game last year. And that's something. And I will happily take back a 13 points per game score, bring back Chris Bell. He had 12 points a game. And adding Eddie Lampkin, I don't think he's going to do anything incredible, but we know exactly what Eddie Lampkin is at this point. He's going to give you a solid, at least 8 and 8 every night. And you take that. And Eddie Lampkin has been kind of this anchor at the 5 for a bunch of teams that have made the tournament in the past. Thinking back to TCU, Colorado made the tournament last year. They had Donnie Freeman, who's a 5-star. They bring in Chance Westry from Auburn, who missed all of last season with injury. But I think he can definitely contribute if he ends up being as good as I think a lot of people expected, or even just a fraction of as good as a lot of people expected. Depth is definitely the big concern for me because kind of beyond their top 6 or 7, I'm just not really sure. But the starting group is pretty good, and I think will keep them competitive enough to where the season at a minimum won't just be a wash. I think they'll be at least a middle of the pack team, potentially fighting for a tournament spot. I'm not sure how bought in I am on Red Autry as a coach. And last year was kind of weird because, anytime you're transitioning from a legend, I think it gets pretty tough. And, he switched some things around just schematically with Syracuse that I think people weren't totally used to. And there were reportedly some locker room issues last year as well. So taking all of that, it's year 2. I'm not totally sure how bought in I am on the Autry experience, but I think there's a world where the team is okay. And I think the ceiling is yeah, they sneak into the tournament. That's what I think. I think like the starting group, like the first 5 or 6 guys are good enough to where I think they can make that happen. So that's where I am on Syracuse. I don't know if that's like a crazy take for Syracuse, but I'm bought in a little bit. Defensively, who knows?
Yeah.
Who's to say? I think offensively they will be very fun. Just defensively, who knows? All right, next up, the Virginia Tech Hokies. A lot of turnover for this year's Virginia Tech team. A lot of the guys that we are used to are no longer there. No more Sean Padula, no more Hunter Couture, no more Northwestern legend Robbie Barron. Most of this rotation projects to be transfers. They bring in Heiser Miller from Temple. 16 points a game last year on horrendous efficiency. So production, but like at what cost? Bring in, is it Jaden Shoot or is it Shut? I've never really known how to pronounce it. It's Shoot?
Yeah.
Bring him in from Duke. He redshirted last season. Could be a good system fit for Mike Young. I think that's reasonable to expect. He's a guy who draws up some nice sets to get some open 3-point looks. So I think system fit could be good there. Experienced front court from the mid-major ranks. So you bring in Ben Burnham from Charleston, Toibu Lawal from VCU. Burnham's a guy who can space the floor. You get some defense from Lawal. But on the whole, I'm not totally sure what to expect from the front court. And I'm a little bit worried that Miller is going to shoot them out of games. Those are my big concerns for Virginia Tech. Do you think this is like they're destined to be bottom of the barrel ACC, or do you see a world where they're like decently competitive?
I don't know. It's one of those weird ones because I think Mike Young can make a team decently competitive, but I'm not so sure he can do it with this roster. Beyond the fact how well it's kind of noted how deep in his bag he goes in terms of the X's and O's when you have this much turnover like you talked about. I wonder how quickly guys get up to speed with that. And yeah, I don't know. This feels like one of his worst rosters in his tenure in Blacksburg, just in terms of on paper kind of talent. Yeah, you look at the list of the losses and it's hard not to feel a little bit down on kind of how this group's going to turn out. I mean, it just does feel like one littered with question marks. So, yeah, I don't know. Can Jaden Shoot be Hunter Couture light like immediately? I don't really know. Like he hasn't played in a live game in a year and more and change because he didn't really get much PT his freshman year at Duke. So Mike Young teams have been so defined by their offense, and it just like if like you said, Miller shoots them out of games, like I don't really know what to expect with these guys other than basement dwelling.
Yeah. I don't think this team will be very good. But I think they'll have a random game or two where they look competent and maybe they beat one of the better teams in the conference. Like they suddenly like figure things out for one night and they, are hosting Wake Forest and they beat Wake Forest or something weird like that. Like that's kind of what I'm expecting here. Like there'll be a game where Miller is efficient and he gives them like 25 and then like Burnham knocks in a couple threes and Jaden Shoot is like he knocks in a couple and then suddenly they're off to the races. Like I think there will be games like that for this Hokies team where they look very competent offensively. And maybe that'll be a little bit later in the season when guys have like had time to kind of figure out the system and learn the ins and outs and understand the X's and O's, because early on this team could look really, really bad. I think they could look absolutely brutal early on, but maybe by the end of the season, they're like playing spoiler a little bit. And I think that's probably like the best outcome for this Virginia Tech. It's a rebuilding year for sure. All right, next up, Florida State. Basically everyone left from last year. No more Primo Spears, no more Baba Miller, no more Jalen Worley, no more Cameron Fletcher, etc. Probably going to be starting true freshman Daquan Davis at point guard, overtime elite legend Daquan Davis. This team, as with a lot of Leonard Hamilton teams, will live and die by their front court. Jameer Watkins will probably be the go-to guy. He averaged 15 points a game last year. Taylor Bowen will have a bigger role in year 2. They add Malik Ewan, who averaged 15 and 9 in JUCO last year. Kind of a wild card, X factor. Like, we'll see what he brings to the table. And the bench is pretty much it's either freshmen or guys who were like secondary, tertiary contributors for teams that were horrible. So that's not great. This roster is not great. It's tough to say like a whole lot of positive. Like, I think Jameer Watkins could legitimately have a very good year, and Daquan Davis will get his feet wet early, that's for sure. But yeah, I'm just really not expecting very much. They maybe have a little bit of shooting coming off the bench, but yeah, they just don't. I just don't know what the best case scenario is, and I'm worried that the best case scenario is like 15th.
I think it is, honestly.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I pretty sure this is the worst. Even given Jameer Watkins' kind of talent, I think this is the worst roster in the conference. Maybe kind of up there with Boston College. I don't really know what to say about this roster. It's just Leonard Hamilton has his work cut out for him. I don't know offensively, like, at all what this team is gonna like. If God forbid Jameer Watkins goes down, like, I don't know who puts the ball in this hoop for them. So we'll see if Jameer Watkins plays at like an all ACC first team level, then maybe this team becomes a little bit more dangerous than we're giving them credit for. But I don't know. There's always some initial hesitation about starting a freshman point guard and like having to play them significant minutes, and that's going to have to kind of be the case.
Exactly.
It could be positive in the long run, but I don't know if that's going to be particularly conducive to success right now for Leonard Hamilton.
It was a bad offseason. It was just a bad offseason. The only real like bright spot was getting Jameer Watkins back, because he was getting a little bit of NBA love, but he decided to come back to Tallahassee for another ride, and I just don't think it's going to be a very fun ride for Jameer Watkins this year. So I think it'll be tough sledding for Florida State for sure. All right, here we go. NC State, the Wolfpack, coming off just an insane magical March run, winning the ACC tournament as the number 10 seed in the conference, get the automatic bid, win 4 games, get to the Final Four, and pretty much all the important guys from that team are gone. So I've seen a lot of places project NC State to be like in the 7-8 range. I'm admittedly a little bit lower on NC State. So DJ Burns is gone, DJ Horn is gone, Casey Morsell is gone, Mo Diarra is gone. They do have some experience in the backcourt, guys who will have larger roles this season. Michael O'Connell's back. Jaden Taylor averaged 11 points a game last year. But I just don't think they replaced the departures very well. The key transfers are all from teams that were miserably bad. Brandon Huntley Hatfield and Mike James from Louisville. Mike James, who funnily enough, we drafted like 2 years ago when we did our college basketball team drafts, because like we needed a Louisville player and a Georgetown player. So Mike James was featured on one of our teams, which I thought was pretty funny. But yeah, you get those guys from Louisville, and you get Dontrez Styles from Georgetown, North Carolina legend Dontrez Styles. It's a pretty bare bones roster, in my opinion. I don't even think they have. I'm lower on the transfers. Maybe you think like the transfers will actually add, an injection of some good stuff to this team, but I just don't even think they have the pieces that could manufacture any sort of like run, even within ACC play. I don't really see it.
I don't know if Kevin Keats can manufacture a run like the one he did last year.
Right. Yeah.
Like we are forgetting that, like you said, this guy had them playing on the first day of the ACC tournament. If they hadn't narrowly beaten Louisville, he would have been fired immediately. Pack your bags, get out of Raleigh.
Yeah.
And so I have some hesitancy, especially because I think a lot of Ben Middlebrooks' success at the 5 last year was that he was kind of platooned with DJ Burns, and I don't know if he can do that this year. I wonder. And so I'm a little probably higher on Brandon Huntley Hatfield, and maybe I should have fact-checked this, but I feel like I remember Kevin Keats talking about Mike James and Huntley Hatfield and being like, yeah, they almost beat us. That's why they're here. It's kind of like dude, it happens a lot in this conference this year. Like John Shire talked about Malik Brown dropping 25 and 8 in Cameron and being like, yeah, I want that guy. It's like bring the guys that beat you type thing. I don't really know. There's a certain level of kind of dynamicism or flair that this backcourt is severely lacking in when you lose DJ Horn. I think Casey Morsell is going to be a bigger loss than people will probably give credit for.
I would agree with that as well. Yeah.
And so, I don't know. So
it's just for me, it boils down to the big name guys you brought in are 3 tank commanders. How is that? How is this anything to be excited about? I don't really want to knock on these guys. I'm sure it was very tough for Brandon Huntley Hatfield and Mike James to have to play in the Kenny Payne era at Louisville. I would not wish that on anybody. I just have to be real here. This is not a roster that I'm excited about. And I think they lost, like you said, a lot of the pieces that made them dynamic and at least a little bit difficult on a one-day scout. I just don't think the team is at all dynamic in the same way.
I think their top 8 is at the very least deep. I think that he has a lot he can kind of Keats can pull from to a certain degree.
Sure.
I just don't know how he goes about doing that, especially when I don't know. You had 2 offensive hubs playing a 4-out style basketball, and Horn, who could get you a bucket whenever. And if DJ Burns sealed his man on the block, it was an auto bucket. Who is doing that this year?
Right. Yeah.
And so I don't know. Maybe I'm not giving enough credit to Huntley Hatfield because I think he can be.
I think there will be a game this year that's the Brandon Huntley Hatfield game. You're wow, that was sick. There might even be a Dontrez Styles game this year. I wouldn't be.
Hopefully that one comes against North Carolina. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised by that. I just like you said, they have a bunch of guys who. It's you can put them on the, and you won't get totally embarrassed, but the overall quality I think is lacking with NC State.
And I want this to be said as a native North Carolinian, and I think this is universally applicable across all NC State athletic programs. But when NC State comes in with expectations, the season does not go well. And when there are lower expectations, they tend to overperform. It's especially apparent with their football program, but I think it could also be applied here for hoops.
Yeah, fair enough. Shout out to Raleigh for getting a tournament site in 2026.
That was big. Some people were upset.
Yeah, narrowly beat out Pyongyang, North Korea for that East Regional. There's I think there's 2 or 3 people will get that, but if you know, you know. All right, NC State moving on. Moving on. Let's talk Boston College. So this team, they lost all their best players. I don't think they added a whole lot of pieces to be excited about. You bring in 3 guys who average double figures on mid to low major teams. I don't want to just cut this super short. I want to give Boston College a little bit of time, but I think this team's going to stink. And it's kind of a shame because Earl Grant's teams have improved year over year, but this is going to be a pretty hard reset.
Yeah, I'd agree. Again, I think I don't know. It's a little. We talked about it with DJ Burns and NC State. Like, what does the post Quentin Post era look like in Chestnut Hill? You know, like
yeah.
So, oh goodness. Yeah, I feel for Earl Grant because it is not an easy place to win, especially now when you add now you're competing with 17 other teams in this conference. Yeah, respectfully, you look at the roster and it's just not. I guess they're banking on Joshua Beadle being the kind of starting guard with Deion Brown, right?
Yeah.
So,
I guess.
I don't love that. So it's an interesting cast of characters, and there's no doubt in my mind that Earl Grant's going to get these guys to compete. But
for sure, I think Deion Brown's an interesting addition. 19-7 last year at UMBC. I get that it's UMBC, but he was productive, and I think Earl Grant maybe has some has like a little bit of magic in his bag. I just don't think the ceiling is like very high at all. Yeah, like the key transfers are coming in. I guess you had Josh Beadle from Clemson, but he played 10 minutes a game last year, and then the other key transfers are from UMBC, Southeastern Louisiana, and St. Bonaventure, and were relatively productive for those teams. But yeah, I think this team might just get absolutely buried. It's tough to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the post Quentin Post era is not probably won't be off to a good start.
Yeah.
All right, next up, here's a team that I'm actually relatively high on, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Actually, they finished 12th out of 15 in the ACC last year, which just going by objective standards is like not a great season. But I think it was actually a decent year for Notre Dame, considering going into that year, the roster was very, very rough on paper. This was a team that I was super low on in the preseason. Like I thought, they could be one of the worst power conference teams we've seen, in the last like 5 years. And to their credit, they were competitive. I think they went like 7-13 or something, which is much better than I expected. And it's basically the same team this year. And I think a lot of people are projecting that Notre Dame will be once again in the 18-team ACC, like in that 12-13 range. I think they could be better than that, given like the continuity and the coaching from Micah Shrewsbury, who I think has definitely proven in the last couple of years to be a fantastic X's and O's coach, great development guy. So I'm not expecting like crazy things from Notre Dame, but I think they'll be better than people expect.
Yeah, I'd agree. There's a lot to like about this roster. Like you talked about the continuity. Shrewsbury just as like an X's and O's offensive acumen coach alone, he's going to win you games. And obviously you get Marcus Burton back, who's probably at the very least preseason All-ACC second team guy, if not first, was the ACC Rookie of the Year. You add Matt Alacco from Princeton, which I think is a really nice add.
Oh, such a good fit, I think. I think he's such a good add.
It's totally going to work. It's totally going to
it's going to work.
It's a seamless fit. Like if you have Burton creating once again and you just have Alacco and Braden Shrewsbury shooting the cover off the ball, like it's going to work.
Yeah.
It feels like a fairly deep roster, kind of like it's a solid like 8-9 man rotation that he can lean on, And I don't know if you buy Sir Muhammad kind of making some kind of an impact as a freshman, So I don't know. I like them. I don't know if I would go so far as to say they're gonna be competing for a tournament bid, but I think they're gonna.
Yeah.
I think they're definitely gonna knock some people out of tournament contention.
I agree. Yes.
So
I absolutely agree.
They're gonna be opening up some bids for other conferences or maybe some mid-major teams.
I I think these guys are primed to be spoilers for sure.
Yeah,
for sure.
With another team that I think we're going to talk about shortly.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know who you're gonna. I think I know who you're gonna say, but we'll see. Marcus Burton and Braden Shrewsbury, like you just bring back your starting backcourt. Great, love it. They both had like good seasons last year. Matalako, like we said, I think is going to be a fantastic system fit. I don't know that I'd say they're like the deepest team, but there's definitely ACC teams who have it much, much worse than Notre Dame does in that department. So I agree with you. I don't think they're a tournament level team yet, but I would not be surprised by like a middle of the pack finish. And it's so hard for me to see this team getting worse or like remaining at that 13th in the ACC level, given the coaching and continuity. We're starting to see Shrewsbury recruit really well. Yeah. I think Notre Dame fans should be very excited for the next few years. And I think this is a year where like you can go in without the burden of expectations. And I think they can have a fun year where maybe they knock off like a couple of big players and we'll see.
Tournament bid soon come next year.
Yes.
Burton, Braden Shrewsbury, and Jalen Harrelson. Yeah. Sign me up.
Yeah. I'm there for it.
Yeah.
Next up, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Georgia Tech is a team that a lot of writers have tabbed as kind of a potential sleeper in the ACC. They do return 3 guys who played at least 27 minutes a game last year, but they did lose quite a bit of depth in the portal. Miles Kelly is a pretty tough loss, having him transfer to Auburn. J.B. McCollum is a solid add from Oklahoma. I will say that. I'm not sure if you have any takes on like the freshmen, if there's any freshmen to watch for on this team. Overall, Georgia Tech is a group that I'm not totally sure what to make of. They could be surprisingly competitive, or I think they could be like kind of gross. I'm not really sure where I'm going to fall on them.
I think it's going to fall more in the former.
Okay.
And I think those kind of upset wins over Duke and Carolina are more indicative of how they can kind of play this year. I know some people I've seen some rankings where they're like 7th or 8th, and I don't know if I can get that high.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like the George McCollum backcourt. I don't know if I want. I like keeping Kwesi Reeves as like this like tertiary kind of option, not as like give him the rock and let him try and go get you a bucket.
For sure.
And so I think, and again, Stoudemire seems, and again, maybe this is me drinking the Kool-Aid, but Bayandongo, Stoudemire like thinks he's going to be one of the best bigs in the ACC, let alone the ACC, maybe even the country. So if you buy kind of
the ACC is not a high bar to clear, I don't think.
So if it is the country, then like I know a lot of preseason prognosticators can get caught up in like, oh, the sophomore jump, but George and Ndongo feel kind of ripe for it, right? Like, they feel like the kind of poster prospects for like how that would work. So I think I really like their like top 3 plus you add in Reeves. And so I don't know, they got a lot to lean on. I wouldn't say this is a deep team though, which would concern me if injuries start to hit this roster. So
who do you think will be better this year, Notre Dame or Georgia Tech?
I'd probably.
Are they're a similar tier for you? I'm guessing.
Yeah. I'd guess I'd go Georgia Tech, but like ever so slightly.
Okay. All right.
I'm not saying there's much confidence.
Yeah, I'm not out on Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's just like a wait and see type of team for me.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot of takes about them in the preseason, but I see like how they could be okay. I totally see it.
Yeah.
The Ndongo hype is wild. That'll be something to behold for sure.
It is sky high, to say the least.
Yeah. All right, next up, is this the team that you were referencing earlier, Miami?
Oh, no, Georgia Tech was.
Oh, Georgia Tech was. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think Georgia Tech could ruin some seasons. A couple like mid-February wins. But
Sure.
No, no.
Why not? All right, we get to Miami, who finished 14th out of 15 in the ACC last year because they completely bottomed out. Absolute collapse, resulting in a mass exodus. You lose Norchad Omier, you lose Wooga Poplar, a bunch of other guys to the portal. Keyshawn George ends up going pro. He gets drafted in the first round. I think we're in for a bounce-back season for Miami. This backcourt is still one of the best in the conference on paper. I firmly believe that. Nigel Pack, Matthew Cleveland. You bring in Bethea, who I think will be just fantastic as a freshman. A bunch of experienced mid-major transfers as well. Jalen Blackman was awesome at Stetson. I'm very in on this backcourt. Not so sure about the front court, but I think the backcourt is absolutely enough for me to buy that this will be like some type of bounce back. It's just, I think, a question of like how high do you think that can carry them? Where are you?
I wanted to ask you a question. In terms of backcourt trios, RJ Davis, Elliot Cadeau, Ian Jackson, or Nigel Pack, Jaleel Bethea, and Matthew Cleveland. Because I think it's Carolina.
It's Carolina, but it's closer than most people think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't like admitting that either, but
I still think Carolina is absolutely the better team. But going band for band in the backcourt, especially with the Jalen Blackman edition, it's a closer conversation. Yeah.
And Staten McCray. I mean, Blackman is just a pure bucket getter. And
he's so nice.
Putting that alongside Bethea, who is the exact same guy. Bethea's counting stats could be, or just specifically his points per game, could be through the roof. They could be exceptional. He's so good. Yeah. Defensively, I don't know what happens, but when he has the ball in his hands, oh my God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This team, I don't know that I expect much from the front court. I guess they bring in Brandon Johnson, grad transfer from East Carolina. He averaged 14 and 8 last year. Was pretty efficient as well. Lynn Kidd, grad transfer from Virginia Tech, averaged 13 points a game in over 23 minutes. So they have guys who can definitely play. And I think even if the front court isn't up to snuff, as I sort of alluded to with one of the teams we talked about previously, this conference is not really, to me, the one that's going to punish you for weaknesses in your front court. And so when I look at how strong the backcourt is, I think they'll definitely be back in the mix this year, assuming they don't have more whatever it was off the court issues or whatever. I think they should be good.
I do too. I would agree. I guess
Probably,
my one.
Oh, go ahead.
My one concern would be if the backcourt shot selection just totally craters. If it's
too many cooks in the kitchen type of thing.
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say with Miami. I think Miami's the team where we see the biggest positive difference between where they finished last season and where they finished this season.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's almost a lock, right?
Probably. I don't know really who else would be in that conversation. I just sort of came up with that now, but
I guess Notre Dame, if they hit like people think they might.
Yeah. If Notre Dame hits their ceiling, maybe they're in the middle. Oh, well, actually, the next team we're going to talk about is definitely up there as well.
Okay.
Not a lock at all, actually, because
is it Louisville?
The Louisville Cardinals. You can't even there's almost nothing to talk about with last season because, one, the team was horrible, but it's also completely different. There is nothing that is the same about this Louisville team from last year to this year. You replace Kenny Payne with Pat Kelsey, already off to a good start. Pat Kelsey was one of the best mid-major coaches in the country, and so I think that's going to prove to be a really solid add. And they have lots of good players now. You get Terrence Edwards. He's probably going to be the guy, Sunbelt Player of the Year at JMU. Kayshawn Pryor from South Florida. You have Chucky Hepburn, who's going to feature as well as that lead guard. To be completely honest, I'm not sure that I love Hepburn as the lead guard. I'm not totally sure if I'm buying that. after seeing quite a bit of it at Wisconsin. But there is no denying that Louisville is in a significantly better spot than last season. They've got a much more talented roster, 1 through 5. They have depth, just a bunch of guys who are going to contribute. I think Pat Kelsey's system, his offensive game plan will be really fun to see in the ACC. I'm really excited to see how that pans out. To me, there are people who are like really high on Louisville, and I almost want to pump the brakes a little bit, but they are like, they've just got, I mean, so much in the way of like talent and shooting, and Pat Kelsey's coach, like the system will be there. I think the ceiling is a top 5 finish in the conference and a tournament appearance. I'm a little bit lower. Like I'm not totally there on like that being where they ultimately end up, but they'll be a good team for sure.
I mean, you kind of hit all of the things I would bring up. So it just a total vibes and culture shift from Kenny Payne to Pat Kelsey, like it's remarkable, the kind of flip. I don't know. I'm excited to see Abubakar Traore in the ACC. I think that'll be.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I think that'll be fun. I think he might start. So we'll see. He has so many pieces. You want to talk about kind of, and again, it's getting them all to kind of coalesce successfully. It's going to be the biggest challenge, but I actually do think Hepburn as at least the point guard, and especially defensively, is going to be fine. But
sure. Yeah.
I do think when like you're gonna that offense is gonna go through Edwards when he's on the floor, Hadley probably, or even Keyshawn Pryor too. Like I don't think Hepburn maybe has to be the shot chucker he was at times at Wisconsin, where like Greg Gard almost forced him to get shots off because that's what they needed from him. So I think this might be just better for his success as a whole. I don't know. I think this roster rocks. I wish Ali Khalifa was playing. If Ali Khalifa was playing, that would then I'd really buy. I'd really be drinking the Kool-Aid. But yeah.
Yeah. That is the thing that will hold them back, is just typically in this era of college basketball, it's difficult for teams that have this level of turnover to like really hit the ceiling that like the talent level would indicate. But it's going to be fun. Louisville will at least be fun. If not the biggest standings differential, definitely the biggest vibes differential, like by far. Like, I mean, it's almost impossible to do better from a vibes perspective.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know. I think Louisville will be in the – I don't know if I quite have them top 5 just because of the continuity. Like the turnover is a tough variable to ignore for me. But they'll be like in the upper half, absolutely. If like they'll be like 6th or 7th, I think, is where I'll probably ultimately have them. And they'll be fun. And that's what's most important, right?
Yeah, it's all about fun.
Is that we have fun. All right, let's get to the newcomers in the conference. We just went through the 15 from last year. Next up, we'll go with the Cal Golden Bears. To me, I'm glad we're talking about them on the heels of Louisville, because to me, Cal is kind of the less good version of what Louisville is, where it's a completely new roster, a bunch of guys out the door. No more. I mean, these names, man. Fardaws Amac isn't there anymore. Devin Askew, who's still in college basketball, by the way. Shout out to Devin Askew. No more Jalen Cone. Bring in a bunch of new guys. I think Andre Stojakovic I'm intrigued, at least. I don't really know what I expect from him in year 2, but I'm intrigued. You bring in Ritus Petratus from Air Force, who will probably be the number 1 option if I had to guess. He was like a 15-6 or 7 guy last year. Matty Sissoko from Michigan State. I don't know if that's like necessarily a piece to get super excited about, because I did listen to a lot of unhappy Sleepers media conversation about Matty Sissoko. So there's that.
Maybe something to be said about a known commodity, especially when on a roster full of transfers, that knowing what you're getting out of a player,
Yeah, which isn't rebounding as much as it probably should be. So that's tough. Stephon Marbury II is on this team for whatever that's worth.
Got to be worth something, right?
I don't know. I'm not expecting a whole lot from Cal. I'm really not. But to Madsen's credit, they jumped 100 spots in Ken Palm from their preseason ranking last year to where they ended up finishing. So definitely a guy who can elevate a team. I just think the first year in the ACC is going to be maybe rough sledding. Plus you factor in the travel aspect of it. I'm not sure how much to put stock into that, but these are guys who you're quite literally going coast to coast. And they're going to be the guys traveling to everybody. Everybody else only has to go to them once, they're the ones who are going to be spending so much time out on the East Coast that I think that could be potentially a problem. I don't know. It's to me definitely a bottom of the ACC type of team here, but hey, we'll see. Okay, next up we'll go to SMU, Andy Enfield and company. Andy Enfield starting out the coaching carousel domino effect that we saw this offseason. So you bring in Boopy Miller from Wake Forest, Chuck Harris. I think they have a pretty solid offensive backcourt in place. Matt Cross, Yohan Traore, good front court pieces. I think there's things to like. X factor for me is the Turkish freshman, Yigitolu. He is 7'2", coming over from Europe. If he can make that adjustment, I think we could see a pretty decent SMU team. I'm just not sure what their ceiling is. I think they should be the best of the new ACC teams, but I just don't know what really the ceiling is because brought in good pieces. I just don't know. Does it just devolve into a Boopy Miller Chuck fest? Maybe.
It might. Again, one of those teams that there's just such a smattering of this one feels very volatile. Is it worse to be? I mean, it would be worse to be in Cal. Their situation just in Dallas, in Texas, it's
a weird one. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's you got people flying to you now, but also you got to also fly out to the West Coast now to play Cal and Stanford, and you got to get to I don't know. It's just.
It is weird. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know he's talked about what he believes Enfield believes his geographical positioning to be positive. But yeah, I don't know. There's so many wings on this roster that I worry what happens if Boopy Miller goes down. What exactly Enfield pivots to?
Yeah.
Does Matt Cross finally hit in the ACC? That remains TBD.
It's so weird because on paper, I like a lot of what I see. Even to the coaching point, Andy Enfield's a good coach who's had a lot of teams make the tournament. And you have, a whole host of guys who are really good last year. I just don't. I don't know what it is. I agree. I think this team could be pretty volatile. Maybe they're a candidate for a Miami type collapse almost, where things seem like they're going okay, and then it just falls off a cliff at some point. I don't know.
This is Matt Cross. Not to get stuck on Matt Cross, but this is his third ACC team, right? Well, I can't remember the order, but I thought he was at Louisville and Miami before UMass, right? I mean, I could just Google this actually.
That sounds right.
Let me just Google this. Quick bio on the UMass website. Yep, spent 21-22 season at Louisville. Oh, brutal. And then played at Miami before that.
Okay.
He's back in the ACC, baby. Let's see.
Sure.
They say
coming off a good year. He had 15-8 last year for Massachusetts.
They say the third time is the charm. So
they do say that.
You do say that. Many are saying.
Also, the experience level on this team, it's a lot of juniors and seniors and like grad transfers too.
Mm-hmm.
So you have guys who have like played and who have played well, and you have a good coach. This is a team that I had a really hard time projecting what I really expect. But I think they'll be fine. Maybe like low ceiling, high floor.
Probably. They just feel middle of the pack.
They feel very middle of the pack, yeah. All right, last one. We're heading out to Stanford, the Cardinal. I don't have a whole lot on these guys. They lost basically all their top players except for Reno, and they don't have any real inspiring transfer additions, in my opinion. I mean, Jalen Blakes is here. I forgot about that.
He is. Yeah, I don't know. I love Jalen Blakes as like an eighth man. I don't know if I love him starting for an ACC
starting
team.
Too. Yeah.
So, yeah, you get Maxime Renault back, and I think I was listening to a Sleepers episode. Actually, maybe I'm misremembering this, but someone on a Sleepers episode said Maxime Renault entered the transfer portal and then came back. That's not a good sign.
Right. Yeah.
No one. So I don't know. This roster is just not it.
It's not deep. It's not particularly talented. Yeah. I'm not super high on Stanford.
Like
at all. Like how different does this team look? Like even if you get back like a Kane and Carlisle. You know, at least you have something to be kind of excited about. The Andre Stojakovic revenge game will feed families.
That it will.
Yeah. I mean, really looking forward to that.
The Kyle Smith hire is good, but it's gonna be a tough first year.
Yeah, gonna be fun though. Staying up till midnight to watch a West Coast ACC game between Stanford and Cal. It is good. It is good that both of these teams are bad, though, because it's just you don't even have to worry about it. Like you can just ignore it.
Finding that game on the ACC network is going to be hysterical.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, you're not supposed to be here.
Hold on. Hold the phone. Okay, so that does it for all of our kind of thoughts on all these 18 teams. This is just a monster conference. So real quick, we're going to break them into tiers. Typically, we do go 1 through 18 or however many teams are in the conference, but for these conferences that are just so big, we just decided to break it up into tiers, make it a little bit easier on ourselves. So Alex, do you want to hit us with the names of the 5 tiers that you carefully selected?
This was not carefully selected, came up with them on a whim.
Yeah.
But league champs, tourney teams, bubble teams, get ready to learn NIT, buddy. And then I believe the last tier is basically the basement, but I believe I said something to the effect of why are you even playing the games?
Yeah, why are we even here? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So first up, tier 1, the league champs. You, I'm assuming, have 3 teams in this tier.
I do. I do okay. Carolina and Wake.
All right. I just have Duke and Carolina in this first tier. Moving on to tier 2, the tourney teams.
Yeah. So I had Louisville, Miami, and Clemson.
Okay.
Clemson had a question mark next to it. So maybe I should have put them
We're already not feeling great about it. Okay, cool. I have Wake Forest and Clemson in my tourney teams.
Okay.
Tier. So I have 2 in the first tier, 2 in the second tier. Tier 3, the bubble teams, I have 3 teams. Who do you have?
I have way more.
You have a lot. Okay, I have Louisville, Miami, and Syracuse in my bubble teams tier.
Because I just think that all of these teams are just going to kind of be on Joe Lunardi's bubble starting in December, and they're just going to stay there. The ACC is going to have like 7 teams within that 16-team kind of pool, I think. So
Sure.
I had Pitt, Virginia, SMU, Syracuse, Georgia Tech, and Notre Dame.
Gotcha. All right.
As kind of like, and this is all I think me leaning into the ceilings more than anything.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Could be another big ACC bubble party this year. Tier 4, get ready to learn NIT, buddy. I have Pitt, Virginia, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and SMU.
I had NC State.
Okay.
That's it. Because
That's it.
Because I think those other bubble teams are going to end up there,
Oh,
But it's
sure,
like,
sure.
but it's
Yeah.
like when you have
You have
7
one
bubble
NIT
teams.
lock, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And then tier 5, why are we even doing this? I have NC State, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Cal, Stanford, Boston College.
Yeah, I mean,
It
I
sounds
had
like you
everyone
have
you
a
said.
lot of the same teams.
Fair,
Yeah.
NC State, Cal, Virginia Tech, Stanford, Boston College, and FSU.
That feels like a pretty solid, not solid because they're in the tier 5, but just, it feels like I don't know.
The right group.
The right group. Yes, exactly. Any thoughts real quick on first team all ACC? I have 3 guys who I think are locks for it, and then after that, I'm not totally sure.
Davis is a lock. RJ Davis is a lock. Hunter Salas is a lock, I think.
Mm-hmm. You don't think Coop is a lock?
I'm pumping the brakes a little bit in my head, ironically. I'm being so optimistic about everything, and I'm telling myself to pump the brakes a little bit on the 17-year-old freshman,
Yeah, sure.
But no, I'll join the consensus there that he probably gets in.
Yeah, then it's just who do we round it out? Because those are the guys. I think it's my 3. I think are locks are Flagg, Davis, and Salas, and then after that, I just don't know.
I'd probably go
like Terrence Edwards.
Oh, I was going to go Marcus Burton.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't mind that.
I'd go Marcus Burton, and then I'd give.
What about Ian Shefflin?
Ian Shefflin a shout. Yeah.
Okay.
Ian Shefflin, or maybe Edwards or Jalen Lowe if you're buying that. I guess if Miami's really good, Nigel Pack. But I think if Miami's good, I think it has more to do with Jalil Bethea. So
maybe, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder how they'll do it with an 18-team conference, just because I think there will be a lot of maybe not a lot, but a few bad teams where guys are putting up crazy counting stats, and so it's just what do you do with that?
I mean, that's totally Jameer Watkins, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah. So I have no idea. I don't know how to answer your question. I guess we have the ACC needs to have a 4th team. You just need to have 20 guys now.
Maybe, or you just go full Big Ten and you have 30 guys on the first team or whatever.
Atrocious. It's so bad.
Yeah.
I think it's
tough.
I think it might be. No, I don't remember. I feel like when I remember voting, it was 10 guys for first team, 10 for second team.
Oh, that's right, because you did the student media poll. Yeah. All right, that's going to wrap it up for the ACC. Oh man, we're almost at 2 hours of podcast.
So
that's what happens when there's 18 teams. So get ready to learn Big Ten, buddy. That's what I'll say. Got 18 teams to cover there, but we'll worry about that when we get there. So Alex has Wake Forest winning the ACC. I'm gonna roll, I think, with the Duke Blue Devils to win the ACC. And yeah, it's gonna be just a beautiful mess of a conference. Alex, any closing thoughts?
It's awful.
It's awful. It's bad.
It's interesting. I don't think I'm ready for another year of inevitably 2 ACC teams making deep runs in the tournament, but only getting 6 teams in, even with now.
Right. Well, yeah, and
squads.
the way things have been trending, it's gonna be like it's gonna be Miami and Louisville who go to the who go to the Elite Eight, while Duke and Carolina lose in the Sweet 16.
You got like Pat Kelsey ripping off his shirt as Chucky Hepburn hits like a sidestep bank-in three to send Louisville to the Final Four.
Right. Just a very ill-advised shot that goes in.
Yeah,
I can see it. I can see it now. All right, that's going to do it for us. Thanks for tuning in, whether you're on Spotify or YouTube. Make sure you throw likes, 5-star ratings, all that good stuff that helps support the show. We'd really appreciate it. You can follow us on pretty much every platform at Range Pod, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. I'm not calling it X, it's Twitter. So we'll be posting a bunch of stuff on those platforms. You can follow me at KHeiserCBB. You can follow Alex at Cervantes P. Alex. And use the code Jimmer for 15% off at Home Field. I do want to plug that. Shout out to our friends at Home Field. Best college apparel money can buy. And believe me, a good amount of my money has bought it. So I
just recently went to it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, what'd you get?
Yeah. I got the I had held off for so long on like the couple jackets they released, but they dropped that like 90s pullover. They dropped the 90s pullover line recently. Yeah, I had to get the Northwestern one, and the script corduroy Northwestern hat was too good, and I got to use the promo code, so it was like a win.
Nice, love it. Well, now that you're up in New Hampshire, it's prime time to load up on some jackets.
I know. I got so many in my closet. I finally get to keep using them. I was worried.
Yeah, I got to figure out what my big home field haul is going to be this year. I'm not totally sure. Because I usually like glom onto like a team that I just like fall in love with over the course of the year, and I'll get something for them. So like last year that was Creighton. Or I have the Indiana State like dad hat too that I really like.
Oh, I thought about getting that one, yeah.
Yeah, that one's really clean. Then I have a Maryland shirt, obviously. So yeah, not sure what the haul is going to be this year, but if you're looking to get some apparel to support your favorite college team, head over to Home Field, use the code Jimmer, you get 15% off, or just use our code anyway, and it helps us out. So we'd appreciate that. For me, for Alex, that's going to do it. This has been episode, I think, 51 of the Jimmer Range podcast. I know, right? I know.
Like the number of threes Ryan Dunn took in college.
For sure. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's going to do it. Episode 51. We'll see you guys next time.